Good evening. Welcome to this Music and Arts Wednesday on Viking.TV. I'm pleased you can join me, maybe the afternoon where you are, or even the morning. But last week we talked about my journey to Opera Holland Park. It was a sort of strange one, and I had a very unusual schooling. I hope you all enjoyed that. And today I wanted to talk to you about really the company and how it came about and what we did and how we sort of winged it a little bit in the early days to get to where we are now. And so really the story picks up after I left Wolverton. I did several jobs and realized that it was time I did something useful. And I got myself into marketing and one day saw a job advertised as the marketing manager for the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea's cultural services. Well, their libraries and arts services, as they called it. And I went for that job. And despite one of my interviewers dozing off during the interview, I got the job. And that may be because he dozed off. I don't know. But anyway, I got the job, and the company, or the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, which is a local government, it's a local authority, had a portfolio of some really nice cultural assets. Actually, it had obviously its libraries, but it also had two very distinctive and important museums, three art galleries, and it had something called the Holland Park Theatre, which was an outdoor theatre in the park, but it had a roof on. And it had been there really. I remember going to the theatre as a kid when I was 5 years old to see the Royal Ballet School, who are now back again. And so there was something on that site for many, many years. And there's the theatre more or less when I arrived. You can see that's the old house at the background. There's another picture of the house before it was bombed by the Luftwaffe. I don't know if we've got that one, James, or if we've already shown it, but we may have already shown it. There it is. Look at that. It was an incredible place. And then the Luftwaffe flew over in 1940 and dropped a firebomb on it. So what we have and what we perform in front of is really the remains of that building. And I could see that it was a very, very, had a lot of potential, the Holland Park Theatre. What it did was a whole variety of things. It had theatre, straight theatre, it had ballet, contemporary dance, and 3 or 4 operas every year. And the operas were bought in by the council. We would pay a fee to an opera company, usually sort of semi-professional, and they would deliver productions of operas. And I sort of spent a few years learning the trade of opera. I took a clear interest in the theatre, as well as all the other things I had to worry about. And I was learning the trade, really, from all these different individuals and companies that were coming in. But the problem is, or was, that we would pay a sizable sum of money to one of these companies, and we could never be quite sure what we were going to get when it came in. And sometimes they were really good, and sometimes they really weren't very good. And I can distinctly remember several really painful productions. One, there was a production of Aida, I do remember, which had the chorus in sort of Egyptian-looking garb. And one of them literally had a tea towel on his head because I could see the word glasses down the side. And I thought at that point it was time we probably did something about this. And I proposed to the council, and you have to remember this is a local authority, so this was a fairly radical idea. I proposed to the local authority that we start our own producing company. And that was in about 1994, 95. And they threw their hands up in horror and said, we couldn't possibly do something like that. We're a council. We don't do that sort of thing. So I sort of put it aside and said, but I think we're going to be back here in a year or so moaning about this very same thing. And of course we were, and we'd had a couple of very dicey productions. And I said, what's the answer, do you think? And of course the decision was, yeah, we probably need to do our own so that we can ensure all of the money we are paying is going on to the stage. and we can ensure the quality. So we began and started our own company. In 1996, we did our first production, a production of Ballo in Maschera, actually, which we're going to talk a bit more about later on in this talk. And we had a great success with it. And the following year, we did 2 productions. And I had also begun at that time, and it has become one of our major themes at Holland Park, I'd begun to explore the late Italian repertoire and the rare Italian repertoire, what's known as Verismo opera. The problem is there aren't many that are well known. And I, for some reason, decided that we should do a production of an opera by Mascagni, who did Cavalleria Rusticana, called Iris, which is essentially predates Madame Butterfly and is really the opera that Puccini kind of ripped off. And it's a monumental piece, and you're going to hear some music from it later. And what's more, I asked some couturiers, some very well-known British couturiers called Charles and Patricia Lester, who did lots of kind of very pleated silk and dvore fashion for the rich and famous, that was very beautiful and very kind of oriental in some respects. And I persuaded them to sponsor the production by making £500,000 worth of costumes for about £10,000, and they were fabulous. And it turned out that this opera got a lot of publicity, but mainly in the fashion press. And there's a very popular store in London called Liberty, which is very distinguished for its kind of aesthetic. And they decorated all of their windows in honor of the opera using some of the costumes. So it was a huge event. And I think we may have a picture of the final scene of Iris there. Now, that cape is about 12 meters of hand-pleated silk. It weighs an absolute ton. It was a very, very beautiful and extraordinarily impactful production. And it was so successful that we repeated it the following year. We actually revived it a year later, did it again, and it sold out again. So we'd gotten on this road of these operas, and we started to explore that opera repertoire more widely, and we blend it with more popular pieces that people knew, and it started to develop a really good audience. And between sort of 1997 and 2000, we were growing the number of productions that we produced, but I had a bit of a problem in that there was a real kind of hierarchy in the opera world, and we had what we called an administrator, and I would find out that he was really just acquiescing to all the requests of directors and designers who said, I need this and I need that, and blah, blah. And it was all very deferential, and we'd end up with overspends. And I thought, well, the council aren't massively committed to this, and if we keep spending too much money, then we're probably not going to last very long. So in 2000, we decided to look for somebody who didn't come from the opera world, because they wouldn't have that deference inbuilt. And the decision was that we would be in charge, not the artistic teams. And that's how we decided to run the company. And the company also had some very key principles. We were set up to give British and British-based talent opportunities, as well as to blend them with more experienced and well-known performers. And we were developing that very well. And in 2000, James Clutton, who is now our director of opera, he joined the company, had a real sort of baptism of fire. He had 6 productions. He'd never produced opera before, but he was producing in the West End. So he had all the right, if you're spending too much money, you can go away, if you know what I mean. So that was 2000. And the problem we had was that, politically speaking, the industry was starting to pay attention to us. But politically speaking, as being part of a local authority, it wasn't terribly convenient for the council every year to explain that they had happily spent a certain amount of money running this opera festival, which by now was all entirely produced in-house. And we were kind of punching above our weight, and I was desperately trying to keep us ahead of the game, so that we would keep favour with the council until we got to a particular standard. And then in, I think it was 2002 and 2003, after this period of insecurity, I mean, every year, we never knew if we would be back the following year. We did a series of probably 3 productions that turned everything on its head. And I've got some pictures of some of those productions here. This was a Lucia di Lammermoor, I think you could probably tell, which was fantastic. And this singer is Anne-Sophie Duprel, who still sings with us today. This was a remarkable production. And then there was another production in the same year. I'm losing track a bit, but this was Fidelio. And this was the first time that, and I don't know if you know the opera, it's Beethoven's only opera, and it's about prison. And this was really the first time that any reference to Guantanamo had ever been seen on a British stage in the opera. And this had an enormous impact, and our stock rose exponentially. And then another one that we also did at the same time was this beautiful production of Adriana Lecouvreur by Chilea. And this again was in that stable of works that I'm going to talk a bit about in a minute, which really got everyone's attention. And so 2002 and 3 were key turning points for the company. The council suddenly realized it had a fantastic asset on its hands that was producing great work. We were starting to get significant sponsorships and support. So it was getting more and more viable. And of course, James and everybody associated with the company was beginning to really get flying, if you like. And then what happened, of course, is that we began to grow. We began to be completely sold out, and we needed more seats, and we needed a more stable theatre, a more luxurious environment if we were going to attract more patrons and serious opera goers and all the rest of it. So in 2007, I went back to the council to persuade them to do something else, which was to spend around £1 million on a new theatre. And I think we've got a picture here of the first architectural drawings that we came up with. If you just hold it there, that roof is incredibly stable. I mean, that's hurricane resistant, and it's got 12 pickup points. It's a very beautiful structure. And the council were persuaded enough to let me buy it. And in 2007, we opened the new theatre. And this was a picture from our very first season with the new theatre in place, which is a really spectacular building and a very beautiful environment that lets the best bits of the gorgeous park around us in, whilst keeping all the worst bits of it out, if you see what I mean, with regard to the weather. So this took us from a 600-seat theatre to a 1,000-seat theatre. And this theatre was continued to be completely sold out for the next few years, which was a wonderful confirmation of everything that we'd been doing. And so once that had happened, we started to continue with our repertoire, which is from a group of operas or a group of composers called the Giovani Scuola. That means young school. Now, the best example of it that you'll probably know is Cavalleria Rusticana or Pagliacci, but it includes lots of different composers that decided to sort of create a new Italian voice and blend it with bits of Wagner and bits of Debussy and invent this new Italian idiom, if you like. And what characterizes these operas is not just their kind of very, very visceral, often violent stories, and everyone loves those, of course, but is the music is, for me, enormously evocative of Italy itself. And I became a bit of an anorak about these operas, and we've been exploring them really ever since, and often it's the only place you can ever see them. I'm glad to see that they've grown in their popularity around the world and around the UK ever since we began doing them, but we're still the primary producers of those. So we've got a few pictures here of some of the production. Now, this opera here is an opera called L'amore di tre re. Now, this is probably my favorite opera, and in fact the lead character is called Fiora, and my youngest daughter, is named Fiora. That's how much I love this opera. Now, I wanted to do this from 2007 when it first came across my desk, as it were. No, sorry, from 1997. And we eventually did it for the first time in 2000. It took 10 years for us to do it before we felt the time was right. It was an enormous, enormous success. And we did it again. We revived that production again in 2015. And that's one of my greatest memories of all my time at Opera Holland Park. Other operas that have made huge impacts include things like Gioielli della Madonna and operas by Cilea La Luciana. And these operas really, really focus in on that human condition. Verismo means real life. So they're kind of kitchen sink dramas in opera. I think we have a couple of clips for you now of some of the music. The first one, I'm not sure whether it's Gioielli or I think it may be Iris, but I'm going to let you listen to two examples. One is Iris and one is Gioielli, which give you a real flavour of why these works have become so enormously popular at Opera Holland Park. So hopefully that gave you a real flavour. The final one, Iris, is an epic, monstrously large orchestra, and that chorus opens the opera. So you're kind of slammed back in your seat before you've even begun. So go off and get the CD of that one. There's a very good recording with Domingo. And Gioeli, I think I played that because that is the intermezzo from the opera. And those weeping strings so evoke the Italian or sort of Sicilian countryside. So this, one of the reasons I love those operas, and they're quite, some of them are quite sordid and tawdry stories, but no worse for that, of course, because we like a bit of tawdry and sordid from time to time, and every tear a dollar, as has once been said. So this is at the heart really of what we do. Every year when we announce our seasons, people go, what are the rarities this year? And if we didn't have a rarity, or one that maybe we've even done before, people get quite cross with us. So it's a core key part of our repertoire that we simply can't do without. And there are an awful lot of these operas yet to be discovered, and I've lost count of the number of them we've done, and most of the best things I think we've ever done have often been in that repertoire. So the orchestra play with fire in them, and it's just wonderful experiences. So, you know, do explore some of those composers like Cilea, Montemezzi, Giordano, Wolf Ferrari, who did the Gioeli, and many others who really bring enormous satisfaction. And of course, Mascagni, who did the Iris. So I suppose really between 2007 and 2015, as a company, you know, we just kept doing what we do, developing our theatre, making it a better experience with every year. We've become real craftsmen in terms of our ability to create this space. These are some productions from recent years to give you an idea of the scope of our stage, which is extremely wide, and very, very visual space to see opera. One good thing is that the stage is as wide as the seating of the auditorium, so it's very easy to be overwhelmed by the scale of what's on stage. That's from Isabeau, another Mascagni opera. That one is too. It's a take on the Lady Godiva story. That's a production of Il Trittico, which is the Suor Angelica. That was a beautiful, beautiful production. So as you can see, we have an enormous variety. That's Lakme. We have an enormous variety in our repertoire. We do the popular works, but we really do love to put on those rarities. And I wanted to give you a little bit of we have the Royal Ballet School. They perform with us every year, their end of year show, which is extremely beautiful and extremely exciting, because a lot of these dancers are about to go into the major companies like Birmingham Royal or the Royal Ballet or English National Ballet or companies around the world. These are some of the world's best young ballet dancers, and it's a very popular 4 performances every year, which are in the middle of the season. So we're going to have quite a lot of music tonight, which is a good thing, I think. And I'm going to play you a clip now just to give you a little idea of sort of where we are from production point of view. I told you that our very first production was Ballo in Maschera, our inaugural production. And this is a production of the same opera that we did last year. It stars, and you'll see her singing, the singer who was in the Lucia di Lammermoor with the bloody dress I showed you. And this is a clip. It's the final scene of the opera. I think it's probably Verdi's most beautiful, beautiful hymn. And it's a little bit gory, so turn away if you don't like the sight of blood. But enjoy this moment of Ballo in Maschera from 2019.
sempre. Ah, ohimè, io amaro miei figli. E
I mean, that's a sensational piece of music. And it's lovely in opera how, you know, you can be lying down with half your innards hanging out and still sing so beautifully, which is one of opera's great charms, I think. So that was Ballo from last year. Very, very highly praised production. Thankfully, you don't win them all, but we certainly won it with that one. And that's sort of where we are, really, as a company. And I hope that gave you a good idea of how fabulous our orchestra and our chorus are, particularly too. So by about 2013, 2014, or a bit earlier, things in the UK, and there were things like austerity, and government was reducing the amount of money that that local government was getting. And it was getting more and more difficult for the local authority to really justify running an opera company. And I had long wanted the company to come out of the council because one could see the writing on the wall, and it was very difficult to raise money, frankly, from individuals when they felt that they were making life cheaper for a local authority. No one really wanted to do that, and so we took the view that if we were to become an independent charity with a one-off grant, we would probably be able to raise more money and get more support ourselves. And so eventually the council agreed to that. And it was a 2-year process because it was quite complex, but we eventually transferred away from the local authority in 2015 and became an independent charity. And that's what we have done ever since then. And I'm glad to say that we had fantastic support and people really, really stepped up for us. It's really important at this point, I think, to explain what Opera Holland Park is really about. We are considered the most accessible opera company in the country. We have a program for the community, which is called Inspire. And from an operatic point of view, our position in the industry is a very unique one. We fill a particular role, particularly in terms of developing and emerging and developing and finding emerging talent and doing this unusual repertoire, for sure. But as a company, our tickets are much, much cheaper than many. We give thousands of free tickets every year to young people and people over 60, kids. We do cheaper tickets for emergency workers and things. Our whole raison d'etre is about accessibility and about popularizing and demystifying the art form of opera. It feels like an uphill struggle all the time. The media constantly return us to the old stereotypes, but we keep going. And one of the key parts of what we do as a company, a very, very key part, is a scheme called Inspire. And that's where we reach out into the community. We do work with schools and we do work with dementia homes, a lot of work with dementia patients. We do work with refugees, with kids, troubled kids who are looked after by the authorities. I mean, an enormous variety of work in the community, and part of that are our ticket schemes. We have £20 tickets, and it all comes under this umbrella of Inspire, and it's massively, massively important to us. And we do an open day, which I'll talk a bit about later. But one of the projects that I have done in the past few years is a number of films that sort of set to prove categorically that you can take groups of people who would never really engage with the classical arts, at all. So very unusual, or not unusual, but unexpected groups to the opera and film the process and the reaction. And we've made 3 of those films. One was called Footy to Verdi. We took 3 kind of middle-aged football fans, you know, to the opera, which was a remarkable success and a result. We did one recently with soldiers with PTSD. You can see all of these on the Viking site, by the way. They're all there, free for you to watch. But one that I think I take a huge amount of pleasure from is one called Hip Hop to Opera. I was mentoring at a school in inner city London, and I spent a lot of time talking to these young people who are around 18 years old about self-belief and about self-image and how they should seek to project themselves. And there was some cynicism amongst them. You know, they worried about prejudice. They worried about the opportunities that they might be denied, no matter how hard they worked. And I understood those concerns, of course, but I did say that I could prove to them that I could put them in an environment as alien to them as is possible to imagine, and that they could thrive and that they could enjoy it. And they said, well, I said, well, I'll take you to the opera. And eventually, after a lot of sort of laughter and skepticism, 8 of them agreed to do it. And we made a film, and they named it this. I asked if they wanted to give the film a title. They called it Hip Hop to Opera. And I urge you to watch the whole thing. But I'm going to show you the opening credits. And the reason we did the credits like this is because people stereotype young BAME people particularly. There's a kind of, you know, cultural shock when they see a group of young black people walking along the street, and there are instant images in people's minds, and I was aware of this, and the kids were aware of this, and so we sought to play with that. So I just want to show you the opening sequence of the film.
So we're going to take 8 inner city teenagers to the opera. We don't know how it's going to turn out, and I'm not sure that they know how it's going to turn out either.
I can tell that you don't know what you're getting into. I just wanna get up close and see what you're into.
So we put these young people, and they were very aware of what we were doing. We were all in on this together. We kind of set this thing up and said, well, look, what are your first impressions of these young people? And we began to make this film. We did it very quickly over 3 days, and it involved, we had some, you know, pre-chats, and we got to understand and learn a bit about each of these individual young people. And then we took them to the Opera House to just have a look around the Opera House and to experience opera singing, really, for the very first time. And I'm going to play you this clip now, which became a bit of a viral hit when it was put out. This film was broadcast on the BBC, and the BBC put this clip out, and it had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views. And I think when you see this clip, you'll understand why.
So what did that mean? What was your impression of that? What did you think of that? First words that come to mind after hearing that.
There's none in the dictionary for that.
Pardon?
Sublime.
Sublime.
Flabbergasted.
And I love watching Maya's face every time, that shock of hearing that voice so close. It was interesting because a lot of the boys and girls, there's 2 girls who were in the film, they were very, very skeptical that that opera would have any kind of impact on them, emotionally or in any depth. They thought that the theatre and the spectacle might be great, but they were very, very doubtful that it would be of any real use to them. But they took part. It was good fun. They had a few nights out, and we took them for dinners. But I think they really, really, even after that clip and that experience, they really weren't ready. And we took them to the Royal Opera House. We started big. And we wanted to put them in the most alien environment they could possibly imagine. And in the film, there's a lovely clip of them all talking together in the bar and chatting. And they seem really at home. It was such a lovely moment. And there were 2 particular boys who were very cynical about this. One was David, who you'll see first in this next clip. And the other one was Bakary, who was very specific. He said, I just don't understand and just can't see why anyone would get emotional about watching an opera. It just doesn't compute. So at the end of the performance that they saw at the Royal Opera House, we got them immediately out afterwards to get their reactions. And this is just towards the end of the film. I talk a little bit about what the film was meant to achieve at the end, but I want you to hear particularly David first in the white shirt and then Bakary's reactions after they'd seen the opera.
I think I'll come opera again. I can see myself being regular. But I said, it kills me to say this. It kills me inside to say this because I don't like being wrong. You know, I don't like being wrong.
When you're wrong, you're right, David.
Yeah, I admit it like a man.
Yeah, I was shocked that it caught me emotionally. Like, of course, it wasn't like very emotional, but in the audience, there was a woman I was sitting in front of me and she was like proper crying. And I was like, I understood why she was crying. I understood why people like opera so much and engage in it because it deals with real life issues and it deals with it in such a way that like it catches you emotionally and like I don't understand Italian, but I understood that properly.
Do I think that all of these kids are going to become overnight opera fans? Not at all. It's not going to happen. It's not about opera. It's about kids seeing themselves in a different way. Opera is just our vehicle. What these guys need to understand is that they can put themselves in environments and in situations and cultural experiences that they never, ever thought were possible and reevaluate their own self-image and what it is to be me. If we're going to address any of these issues about young people's aspirations, we need to start challenging them in this way and challenging themselves to put themselves into environments and situations that they never ever thought they could do. And we don't do enough of that.
I think I still find Bakary's little speech at the end there one of the best summaries of opera, actually. We should just sort of type it up and just print it everywhere, I think. He really, really got it. And it was lovely to see that he was brave enough as well to admit that. And that the film wasn't just about, you know, get young people to like opera. Really what it became about was about seeing themselves very differently, as I said at the end. It was more important than the music. And I think it says a lot about what we do, that film, I think. That's what we try to achieve all the time in everything we do. but it means a lot for the opera world, I think, to actually offer what we do in these kind of realms in terms of social mobility and working with other agencies who are working with young people who have got struggles and hurdles in their life. So it was a beautiful thing, and really, really a lovely postscript is that the film was very successful, and we won several awards around the world, and we won 3 we were nominated for 3, and we won 2 at the Milan International Film Festival. And I asked a very generous donor if they would give me the money to take all of these kids for a 4-day trip to Milan. And they agreed. And we went and had a fabulous time at the awards. And we had a really, really memorable day at the gorgeous Lake Como. So just from that one little agreement to take part in a little project, they ended up having a fantastic trip to Milan and becoming kind of minor celebrities. And it was very, very touching to show the film to their school. They were all really nervous about all their school friends seeing it. We showed the film to the school, and the impact was enormous. And one boy said, you know, these are my friends, and I never realized that they could be like this and communicate how they felt this way. It was a fantastic project, and I'm glad to say I'm still in touch with all those guys, and they're fantastic young people now, all at university. So please do watch that film if you get the chance. You can see it on our YouTube or on the Viking page. So the next really significant thing I wanted to talk to you about is a much more difficult thing for us. But I think what it showed was what we feel, how we feel about our place in our community, and how we as a company respond to crises. I think it's very, very important that we project ourselves as part of our community. And I grew up in Holland Park itself. I was a kid playing in Holland Park. I grew up, went to school around there, and the very, very big event that happened to us in 2017 was the Grenfell Tower fire, which you may, and I imagine you've all heard about, when 72 people were killed by a fire in a block of flats. Now, Grenfell is very close to Holland Park, and a lot of the people that work for us come from the community up in North Kensington. And on that day, we were all sort of up early in the morning trying to check on everybody, and we realized that one of our staff lived in the tower, and her name was Debbie Lamprell. And people were trying to phone her, and we couldn't get her. Debbie was a long-serving member of staff. She was our fire and safety officer, and everybody loved her. She was a great presence in the theatre, and she was backstage and front of house, and so she knew the cast and the orchestra as well as all the customers. She was wonderful, and she was always smiling. And I remember having a funny little thing with her that night. But she went home that night, and unfortunately, to cut a long story short, she perished in the fire, which was an enormous blow to all of us. But it was an enormous blow, really, to the community of Kensington, and we felt there was an extraordinary response by the public generally, with donations and with help and food. It became a very politically difficult situation, but there was a fantastic humanity on display, and we felt that we should do something about that. And we did just later in that season, we did a Verdi Requiem at very short notice and raised a huge amount of money to give to the Grenfell Fund. I think we've got a picture of the Requiem here. That was that. We had the most remarkable cast of singers. Everybody offered their services for this thing, which we set up in no time at all, and was a terribly moving event. We also, as a company, became, I suppose, the guardian of Debbie's mother, who was elderly. Debbie was an only child, and we still to this day kind of take care of her mum. And Grenfell means a lot. But the reason I'm talking about Grenfell as well, and it's to get in some music too, is that on the 1-year anniversary of Grenfell, we decided to do a gala performance. We had poetry readings, lots and lots of music. And there was one piece we closed the evening with. Now, this piece of music had become already a very important and significant piece for our company. A composer called Will Todd, who had written an opera for us called Alice in Wonderland for the families, had also, for many years ago, done a beautiful, beautiful arrangement of Amazing Grace. And actually, it was played at Obama's pre-inauguration service. So it was pretty well known, and it had become something of a funereal piece. We played it at the funeral we had it sung at the funeral of one of our great staff members many years before. I had it sung at my brother's funeral and at my mother's funeral. We also had a private service in the theatre where the cast of the production that was on sang it for Debbie's mother personally, which is possibly one of the most difficult days of my life, particularly. And so Will wrote a new orchestral arrangement. He'd never written a full orchestral score for Amazing Grace, for his arrangement of Amazing Grace. And for this gala, he did. And he dedicated it to Debbie. And it was the last thing that we performed on this hugely emotional evening in 2018 when we did the gala. There was a lot of people from the community in the theatre. We'd done a wonderful children's piece specially for it, and all these hundreds of kids sang on stage. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, really. The kids were crying on stage. It was overwhelming. But we sang Amazing Grace, and a fantastic choir of top international singers, and you'll see them all in this clip. I wouldn't normally do this, but I think it's important really to pay respects to this moment, because I think it's one of the most sacred moments we've had at Holland Park. I'm going to play you the whole performance of Amazing Grace. If at the end you can see the conductor, who is the composer, you'll see him leave the pit and he gives the copy of the score to Debbie's mother, who is sitting next to me in the audience. But I want you to hear this. I think it says an awful lot about Opera Holland Park as a company and about our community. And it's also an exquisitely, exquisitely beautiful piece of music. So please, for the next 5 or 6 minutes, enjoy Amazing Grace. I mean, I don't think I need to say much more about that, really. It's one of my favourite, well, not favourite, if you see what I mean, but one of the most memorable things I think I'll ever have from my time at Opera Holland Park. The power and the atmosphere in the house that night was overwhelming. And I think it showed our company in our best light, really. We did, Debbie was, as I said, was enormously popular, and we take care of her mum now, and we installed a stone for Debbie at the theatre. So every year her mum comes to see the stone and watch a performance, and this stone is very much in the position where Debbie used to sit on a bench, actually, and listen to the operas during the show. And that's really Grenfell, which is still something that runs today, and we're in the middle of the inquiry, but we're forever sort of linked with it now, and we will continue to raise money if we can, and work with the community that is still enormously damaged and still healing very much. And from that, really, I just wanted to, I'm coming close to the end of this talk. I mean, as a company, really, we're a fun bunch. And there's a picture of me here, I think, or I've got some family. If we call ourselves a family, and actually in my case, it's true. That's my son in a wonderful picture of the last production. We've done 3 productions of Ballo in Maschera. The one we did last year, and that one we did in 2009. And that was my son, who's now a 22-year-old musician. My little girl also performed on stage in Norma. So we make it a family affair very much. We like to have a bit of fun, as you can see on the front terrace there. I think we could probably skip past that one, me being the Don. We also have an open day, and an open day, we have thousands of people come in, and everyone gets the chance to conduct the orchestra, a minute maestro, we call it. And you can basically conduct set pieces and wave your hands around. And this is me taking the opportunity to do a bit of conducting. They obviously played brilliantly for me, even though I probably wasn't conducting terribly well, but that's fair enough. And that's a big part of our community. And then I wanted to just show you, really bang up to date. This is a trailer that we did last year. You're probably sitting there thinking, what is this place like? It's hard to imagine a sort of an outdoor opera festival and not think of it in some, sort of a bit poor way of bad conditions or whatever. It's a very, very sophisticated place. And we did a little trailer last year, and I think it shows beautifully where we are in the park and what we're surrounded by, the scale of it, and a little bit of the atmosphere if you were in the theatre and what it's like to walk through some of its environment. So just a quick trailer here. So that's just a little mini taster of what our theatre is like. You can see where we are situated in the middle of that park. It's a very beautiful place, very peaceful. And we are bang in the centre of London, by the way. So it's a real refuge from the streets and the noise. And I hope one day when if any of you come to London, those of you who are not already here, you will get to visit Opera Holland Park. I, of course, am retiring at the end of this year. So you won't see me hanging around in the bar. Well, you might if I'm visiting at the time. And I suppose the last final quick thing is COVID and how it's affected us. COVID, we had to cancel our season like everybody. But we had very generous patrons, and they were wonderful. And they made lots of donations of their ticket money to us. And as a company, we're in a financially sound place. We're just coming out of the hibernation now. We did a little small event in the theatre forecourt a few weeks ago, and on Saturday we have a concert for 200 people, which is wonderful, and then 2 more in August. So we're kind of creeping our way back to music making and being in touch with our patrons and friends who mean so much to us, and of course we mean a lot to them. So I hope in this sort of, what is it been so far, 50 minutes, an hour, gosh, how time flies when you're having fun. I've given you a potted history of what I think is one of the most remarkable opera companies in the UK. And I do hope that you will one day come and see us there. And I'd like to thank Viking as well for the support and their partnership that they've given us for the past few years. They have good taste. So I'm happy now to take some questions.
Hi, Michael. Thank you.
Hi.
So our first question comes in from John in Hampshire, and he says, what do you plan to do after Opera Holland Park? I really hope you continue your amazing hip hop to opera work.
Well, John, I'd like to do more of those films. Of course, COVID has very rudely interrupted my search for further career paths. There's not an awful lot out there. No one's doing a lot of new planning. So making more of those films and doing more of that sort of work is very much on the cards, and we'll see. I'm having a meeting quite soon with a writer who is, we're looking at turning the book Noisy at the Wrong Times into a theatrical play or a one-man performance. So that's something I might be focusing on. And I don't know if I will end up in the arts. I'm very keen to get involved in social development, if you like, so working with young people, perhaps working in academia and education in that realm. So I don't really know. If, John, you have an idea and the pockets to pay me, I will be happy to talk to you. But thanks for your question.
Next question comes in from Howard in Reading, and he says, what is your favourite opera? Do you like other performances like plays or musicals?
I love plays. My favourite opera, it's always a difficult question, but I think if I had a desert island disc, it would be L'Amore di Tre Re, that opera I told you about earlier. It's 90 minutes. There are 3 corpses at the end. The music is just sublime and febrile. I think that's probably my favorite. I mean, but I love a lot of the big pops as well, like everybody else. I am not a big fan of musicals, I'm afraid to say. I can't get used to them. There's something about them that I don't really like. And I know everyone's going to throw their hands up in horror now, but what can I say? But I do, and I love other kinds of music, as I think I said last week. And I do like the theatre. The plays is I don't see enough of them, but I'm a big fan.
So Douglas from California, he sent in a lovely comment. He says, thanks for sharing your story. My grandfather came from Italy and his journey was interesting. And as they say, the rest is history. I hope the best for you in your next stage of your life adventure. That's
very nice of you to say. Thank you very much.
Question in from Dennis in Largo. He has put, warm regards. As an unsided open theatre, how impactful a challenge is the English weather?
Well, we have sides in a sense. We have very, very big taut panels which give us sides. The weather, it's not a problem if it rains. We have this enormous roof and sides, and the theatre inside is quite cosy. The problem tends to come if it's low temperature, which in the English summer, even if it's 75 degrees, by 9:30, 10 o'clock, the temperature can drop quite a lot. And because people have been used to the heat, they've gone through the temperature drop in the outdoors, and it can feel very cool. So I think that's probably the biggest problem, is temperature as opposed to anything else, because everything else is pretty well protected. We're not heated, of course.
The next question comes in from Art in Arizona. He's got two questions. His first question is, what music venue do you use for your productions, and do you project the words above the stage?
I'm not sure what he means by use. What venue do we use for our productions? If he means rehearsals, does he mean rehearsals? I'm not sure. Anyway, we rehearse in various places around the place, but of course we use the Holland Park Theatre that I've shown you for our productions. And yes, we have surtitles above the stage, so there are translations available for the audience, which I think they like a lot. But they're not too intrusive. You just have a little glance now and again. You don't need to sit there watching, because it's just a kind of a short summary of what's being said, not a verbatim translation. But yes, we have subtitles.
Thank you. Next question comes in from Erwin in Scottsdale, and he asks, is there an orchestra for the performances, and is it local?
Yes, we have a full orchestra. You could see it in some of the clips there. It's the City of London Symphonia we use and have done now for 17 years. They've become a wonderful opera orchestra because they've done over 100 productions with us. And a lot of the players have gone all the way through those 17 years. They are based in the City of London, and they were set up by a very distinguished conductor called Richard Hickox. And they won a lot of awards in their time. They're a brilliant, very flexible and responsive orchestra who we have had a long-standing relationship with. So our orchestras will vary in size. For the Gioielli della Madonna, it was 74. On average, it's around 50, 55. You'll see that our orchestra pit isn't sunken below the stage. So the orchestra is really a main part of the performance. But also that means that acoustically, they're much louder. So we don't like to have huge orchestras too often.
Thank you. Next question comes in from Joyce from Iowa, and she says, do you always perform the operas in the original language or in the English translation?
Good question, Joyce. We do, except we always perform in the original language because that's also partly important for emergent and young singers, if you like, to develop their repertoire in Czech and French and German and Italian. When we do English operas, say Benjamin Britten or the Jonathan Dove you saw a picture of Flight, we'll do it obviously in English because that's their original language. The only exception is when we do operetta, so something like The Merry Widow or Die Fledermaus, those very fun, very frothy operas. We will do those in English because they have a lot of jokes and a lot of kind of repartee. And it's, jokes don't work in German in translation on a screen. You need them to be instantaneous. So we'll do those in English translations, but usually everything else we'll do in the original language.
Thank you. Next question is from Phoebe in London, and she asks, will we be able to watch the full version of Ballo anywhere?
Yes, in fact, you shall. We will at some point be broadcast very soon. We're just working out the details, but it will be broadcast in full, we hope, on Vimeo, and there will be some small payment for that. I think we may even ask Viking to help us tell you about that. I don't know. Viking may advise you when that happens, but keep an eye on our website and our Twitter feed. But yes, we will be doing Ballo in full soon. Not sure exactly when, but soon.
Al from California, he has put, can a ballet be combined with an opera, and if so, what is it called?
Yes, it can. In fact, Iris had a short ballet in the middle of it. We had three dancers from the Royal Ballet School perform that wonderful ballet. It's a wonderful music too. There's few operas with ballets. They often get cut out now because obviously it's expensive and it makes them too long. And the Adriana Lecouvreur has a short ballet in it too. So a lot of kind of grand opera will have big dance pieces. I'm not sure if it's called anything other than just the ballet in the middle. There probably is a word, actually, now I think about it, and I can't remember what it is. But it's an opera with a ballet in it. The opera takes precedence.
Thank you. So this is the last question of the evening, and it comes in from Shelton in Silver Spring. And he has said, what will be the follow-up over time with the young people of the mentoring group? What centres and nurtures you in work in the theatre and community?
I'm not sure I quite fully understood the question, but I think we will always nurture and cultivate a young audience. It's just core to what we do in our Inspire work. Our school's matinee, we have 1,000 kids. That opera, Ballo, you saw the clip of, 1,000 kids between the age of 7 and 11, I think it was, sat in a theatre for 3 hours and watched that opera. And the reaction at the end is screaming in approval. It's everyone at the company, it's our favourite day of the year. In fact, that 5 minutes of applause and screaming is our favourite 5 minutes of the year. It's such an incredible reaction. And what it shows, and what it shows us, and me personally, I'm a proselytizer for very early years cultural education. It shows that we make assumptions on behalf of our kids about what they're able to enjoy, what they'll understand. They don't have the attention span. Well, rubbish. All of that is rubbish. And anybody who says that, be they in education or in any other field, or politicians who are causing a great deal of damage at the moment to our cultural education, they're talking rubbish. They don't know what they're talking about. And we will continue to push this particular line because we believe it's very, very important for the development of children to enjoy comprehensive and very full and nourishing experiences like the ones we give them. And we should never, ever underestimate our kids' ability to appreciate beautiful things. They really, really can. And as an industry, we need to do more, but we can only do so much. Most of it has to come down to the government and education. So we'll always carry that torch, and right through the age groups. So, and of course, they're future audiences. We even commercially, it makes sense, as well as culturally and philosophically.
There's one last comment that I think will be nice to finish on for you. It's coming from Patrick from Jacksonville Beach. And he says, kudos to you for taking the time and effort to work with the youth of your community and to expose them to something they would never have experienced. You have changed their lives and made a real difference. You have truly made opera come alive for them and for me.
That's a lovely, lovely thing to hear. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate that. And I've enjoyed talking to you all. I hope you've enjoyed listening. And that one day you'll make it to London, possibly on a Viking ship, to see us, come and see us. But if you have a local opera company, if you've never really explored it, then go and support them, especially now when they're able. And you never know, you may discover a whole new life for yourself with a love of opera. Thank you again.